Emily had not planned to stay long that evening. She only wanted to return a beige winter coat she had borrowed from her best friend, Lisa, after a snowy night out 2 weeks earlier. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind where the streets looked like they were resting, and the sky held that pale winter light that made everything feel calm. Emily drove through their peaceful neighborhood with the radio playing quietly, thinking she would drop the coat off, say a quick hello, and go home to finish laundry and prepare for work on Monday. Nothing about the day suggested anything unusual was coming. When she knocked on the door, she expected Lisa to swing it open with her usual bright energy. Instead, the door opened slowly, and standing there was Daniel, Lisa's younger brother. Emily hadn't seen him properly in years, maybe since the summer when Lisa hosted a graduation party. And even then he barely stayed around for conversations. Back then he was awkward, always rushing out, headphones on, eyes full of unspoken thoughts. But the man in front of her now looked different, older, calmer, with tired eyes that held stories she couldn't read yet. "Hey, Emily," he said, offering a polite, almost shy smile. His voice was deeper than she remembered, steady, but softer than she expected. Emily returned the smile, surprised at how warm her chest felt. "Hey, Daniel, I didn't know you were back in town." He stepped aside to let her in, moving slowly like someone who hadn't slept well. "Lisa didn't tell you? I'm here for a while, just figuring things out." She could hear footsteps upstairs, drawers opening, papers shuffling. Clearly, Lisa was getting ready for something. The house smelled like cinnamon candles and fresh laundry, a comforting scent that felt like home. Daniel leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, looking both relaxed and guarded. Emily handed him the coat. "I actually just came to return this." "Tell her thanks again. Stay a minute," he said, voice gentle but hopeful. "She'll be down soon." Emily sat on the edge of the couch, unsure if she should say something or simply wait in silence. The living room was quiet, except for a soft buzzing from the heater and the distant sound of wind outside. Daniel stayed on the other side of the room, leaning near the bookshelf. Like there was an invisible distance he wasn't sure he should cross. He glanced at her a few times, almost as if he wanted to say something meaningful but wasn't ready yet. Before the silence grew awkward, Lisa came rushing down the stairs, pulling on a coat and grabbing her purse. "Emily, perfect timing. Thank you so much for returning this." Emily smiled, relieved. "No problem. I was heading home anyway." Lisa looked at her brother and rolled her eyes dramatically. "Daniel's car is still in the shop, and I really can't drop him off tonight. I'm already late. Could you take him downtown?" Emily blinked, stunned by the sudden request, but nodded without hesitation. "Yeah, that's fine. I'll drop him on my way." Daniel looked at her with a quiet gratitude that felt strange and deeper than a simple favor. "If you're sure, I don't want to drag you out in the cold." "It's fine," she said, grabbing her keys. "Let's go before the snow starts again." The moment they stepped outside, the temperature hit them like a soft winter slap. The sky was turning from blue to a smoky gray, snow clouds gathering above the streetlights. Their breath misted in the chilled air, and the night felt quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. Inside the car, the heater hummed while soft instrumentals played on the radio. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, resting his hands loosely in his lap. His shoulders were relaxed, but his expression carried a heaviness Emily didn't know how to read. They pulled out of the driveway slowly, and for the first few minutes, neither spoke. The silence wasn't tense, just quiet, like they both needed time to adjust to being alone together for the first time in years. Emily noticed he kept looking out the window, not in a distracted way, but in a thoughtful one, like he was searching for the right moment to speak. She finally asked, "So how long are you staying here?" His answer came after a short pause. "I'm not sure yet, just taking things one day at a time." Emily nodded, sensing there was more behind his words, but she didn't push. Daniel turned slightly toward her, the streetlights reflecting in his eyes. His expression wasn't sad, but there was a quiet emotion there, something tired and unspoken. He let out a slow breath. "It's been a strange year. A lot changed faster than I expected." Emily wanted to ask what happened, but she stayed gentle. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No pressure. He looked at her, and for a second, their eyes held calm, steady, familiar in a way that surprised them both. Thank you, he said softly. That means more than you think. The car rolled through quiet streets lined with bare trees and dim porches. Snowflakes began falling lightly, floating in front of the headlights like tiny sparks. The world outside felt cold, but inside the car there was warmth, not romantic, not dramatic, just a quiet connection that felt real and simple. Emily kept driving, hands steady on the wheel, but her heart beat faster. Something unspoken was rising between them, not loud or sudden, but slow and gentle, like a door opening quietly after years of being closed. It was only a ride, only a favor, only a night ending like any other. Yet Emily could feel at this moment meant more than either of them admitted. And Daniel seemed to feel it too, because just when the silence settled again, he shifted in his seat, sat up straighter, and opened his mouth like he finally decided to speak the truth he'd been holding on to. The night had just begun, and Emily realized this drive might not be as simple as she thought. The ride continued through quiet streets, snow turning into a thin mist that clung to the car windows. Emily's hands stayed steady on the wheel, but her mind buzzed with curiosity. Daniel's quiet presence felt heavier than it should, like he was carrying something too big to put into words. He stared out the window, his eyes tracing the dim streetlights. And she wondered what had changed him so much since the last time they'd met. There was a distance now, yes, but also something fragile, almost longing. Finally, Daniel exhaled a long, soft breath that seemed to release a weight he'd carried silently for too long. I should tell you something, he said quietly, his voice low but calm. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was the kind of quiet statement that made Emily sit up a little straighter, alert to what might come next. What is it? She asked, her tone gentle. She didn't want to push, but she couldn't hide her concern. The car was filled with a delicate tension, a feeling that something important was about to be shared. Daniel hesitated, glancing at her briefly before looking back out the window. I moved back here because I needed to start over. After a breakup. It was hard. Harder than I expected. He kept his voice calm, almost steady, but Emily could sense the vulnerability underneath. It wasn't anger, not at all. It was a tired, honest kind of sadness. Emily nodded slowly, keeping her eyes on the road, letting him talk in his own time. I'm sorry, she said softly. Do you want to talk about it? Daniel shook his head just slightly. Not really, I just wanted to explain why I'm back, why I'm here. I haven't really told anyone yet. And I wanted you to know because I trust you. Emily's chest tightened a little. Trust wasn't something he gave easily, she realized. And the fact that he was giving it to her right now felt intimate in a quiet, careful way. She didn't interrupt, didn't ask for details. She let the car carry them through the soft mist outside, letting the moment unfold naturally. The streets were almost empty, the winter night feeling both peaceful and alive. Every turn in the road seemed to echo Daniel's words, giving them weight. Emily noticed how his hands rested in his lap, how he didn't fidget or try to distract himself. It was as if he had been holding all this in for years and finally decided it was safe to breathe. You're handling it well, Emily said gently. It sounds like you've been through a lot, but you're still here, still moving forward. Her words were simple, but she meant them. She wanted him to feel seen, not judged, not pitied, just understood. He turned toward her, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. Honestly, Emily, I'm glad you're the one driving me tonight. I feel like I can be honest around you. Most people don't get it. Most people don't notice things like you do. His smile was faint, not forced, but there was warmth in it. A quiet relief. Emily felt a flutter in her chest, but she didn't let it show. She kept her hands on the wheel, letting the words sink in. Daniel's openness wasn't romantic, not exactly. It was deeper than that. It was the start of connection, something rare and genuine. And she felt privileged to witness it. For a while, they drove in silence again, but this time it was different. The silence wasn't heavy. It was comfortable, almost reassuring. Emily noticed details she had ignored before the soft way. Daniel's fingers tapped on his thigh when he thought no one was looking. The way his shoulders relaxed when he leaned back against the seat. The occasional small smile that hinted at memories or thoughts he hadn't voiced. The city lights blurred past them, reflecting in the wet streets. And the snow began falling again, soft and quiet. Daniel glanced at Emily once more. "It's strange," he said softly. "I feel like I've been holding this all inside for so long, and it's like a weight is lifting just talking to you. I didn't expect that. I didn't know I needed it." Emily's voice was barely above a whisper, but steady. Sometimes saying nothing isn't enough. It's okay to let it out. "I'm glad you are." Daniel smiled again, a little wider this time. He didn't look embarrassed, not nervous, just relieved. It's rare, you know? Feeling like someone listens without judging, without trying to fix you. Most people just want answers, solutions. I just wanted to be heard. "That's fair," Emily said, keeping her tone calm, her eyes on the road. She could feel the intimacy in the moment, but it wasn't overwhelming. It was subtle, a quiet understanding that didn't demand anything from either of them. Daniel leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I guess I'm not great at letting people in. But tonight, it feels different. I feel like maybe I can start again. Maybe I can feel normal without worrying about pretending I'm fine all the time." Emily's heart softened. She felt a connection not many people would get. She also felt a strange, unspoken attraction, not physical, but emotional. The kind that makes you want to know someone deeply without pushing too fast. She realized she had been waiting for something like this, to a conversation that mattered. A quiet understanding that wasn't rushed or forced. The mist outside grew thicker. The streetlights dimmer, and the car moved slower through the soft snow. Daniel finally looked directly at her again. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for just being here, for driving, for not asking too much. You make things feel easier." Emily felt warmth spread through her chest, a gentle rush of feeling she didn't fully understand yet. She smiled faintly. "I'm happy to be here, Daniel. Really?" For the rest of the ride, they didn't speak much. The music played softly in the background, the snow whispered against the windows. And the car seemed suspended in a moment that was both ordinary and extraordinary. Emily knew this ride wasn't just about getting Daniel downtown. It had become something more, a bridge, a quiet revelation. A shared understanding that neither of them had expected by the time they neared the city center. Emily realized how different this ride had felt from any other favor she had done in the past. It was calm, yes, but full of emotion. It was quiet, yes, but heavy with meaning. And she knew without saying a word that something between them had shifted. Something gentle, unspoken, and entirely real. Daniel's quiet honesty, his willingness to open up, had transformed the night. Emily's own openness, her patience and attention, had created a space where he could finally breathe. It was not dramatic, not sudden, not overwhelming, but it mattered more than either of them could fully explain. As the streets grew brighter with city lights, and the car slowed near a familiar intersection, Daniel's hand rested lightly on his knee, calm, thoughtful. Emily drove on, heart steady but alert, sensing that the ride would leave a mark on both of them. A quiet memory of honesty, trust, and the beginning of something they could not yet name by the time they reached Daniel's stop. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was gentle, filled with understanding and a hint of possibility. Emily realized that tonight. A simple ride had become something rare, a moment of connection, calm revelation, and the subtle start of a bond that might change everything. And Daniel, finally, seemed lighter, more himself than he had in a long time. The car rolled along the quiet streets, snow falling softly against the windshield, creating a delicate shimmer in the streetlights. Emily drove steadily, her hands firm on the wheel, but her thoughts were distracted by the conversation that had unfolded earlier. Daniel had shared more than she expected, and it was clear his words had not been casual. They had been deliberate, sincere, a quiet revelation. The evening air was cold outside, but inside the car, a gentle warmth lingered, not just from the heater, but from the subtle closeness that had settled between them. Daniel's gaze had been distant for much of the ride, thoughtful, reflective, as if he were measuring the moment carefully. Emily noticed the slight tension in his shoulders had softened. He seemed calmer now, more present. She could feel the vulnerability in the way he spoke, the way he let silence fill the spaces between their words without fear. There was honesty in his pauses, a trust that wasn't easy to earn. And yet, beneath that calm exterior, Emily sensed a quiet, longing feeling that hinted at things unsaid. Memories buried, emotions held back for years. "You know," Daniel began, his voice breaking the soft music playing in the car. "It's strange being back here. I've seen these streets every week when I lived here before, but now they look different. Smaller, somehow. Or maybe I've changed." He paused almost to see how she would react. Emily gave a soft smile, encouraging him to continue without pressure. The night had created a fragile space where words could be spoken honestly, without judgment or expectation. "I think I've always carried a lot inside," he said quietly, eyes still fixed on the streetlights outside. "And I never knew how to let it out. I guess I thought being quiet meant I was strong, but I was just alone." His tone was calm, almost resigned. But there was a subtle ache that Emily recognized immediately, the ache of someone who had hidden feelings for far too long. Emily's fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. Not in tension, but in empathy. She didn't need to speak, and she knew he didn't need her to respond immediately. Sometimes listening without interruption was more powerful than any words. And yet, the atmosphere in the car felt charged, alive, full of a quiet emotion that was difficult to name. The car passed an old bridge, the kind Emily remembered from childhood walks with Lisa. Daniel's eyes lingered on it for a moment, and she noticed a faint smile tug at his lips. "Do you remember that summer years ago?" he asked softly. "Lisa dragged me along to watch the fireworks, and I didn't want to go. I thought it would be boring, but somehow I couldn't stop noticing you. You were laughing, bright as ever, and I—" He hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Emily felt her heart skip slightly. She hadn't expected him to remember such details, especially not with this clarity. She kept her eyes on the road, feeling warmth spread across her chest. There was a pause, and Daniel continued, his voice low but steady. "I wasn't shy, I just didn't know how to say what I felt. But I noticed you. I always noticed you more than anyone else around." The words were simple, honest, and yet they carried a weight that made the silence after them feel almost sacred. Emily swallowed her pulse, quickening not from fear, but from the unexpected depth of emotion. Daniel's confession wasn't dramatic. It wasn't demanding, it was quiet, almost fragile, like he had been holding it for years, afraid that revealing it might break something delicate between them. For a moment, neither spoke. The music played softly, the snow continued to fall, and the city lights reflected off the wet streets, creating a gentle shimmer that made the car feel suspended in time. Emily realized that this was no longer just a ride. It had become a private moment of truth, a shared experience that mattered more than either of them expected. The air between them was calm but heavy with the unspoken, the emotional, the romantic potential simmering quietly under the surface. Daniel turned toward her slightly, as if deciding how much he could reveal. "I've been carrying these feelings for a long time," he said, voice almost a whisper, yet clear. "And being back here, seeing you again, it's hard not to think about what could have been, what might still be." He looked away, embarrassed, but his honesty was unwavering. "I didn't expect tonight to feel like this. I didn't expect to be able to talk to you like this, to be open." Emily kept driving, her mind racing, yet calm. She felt a stirring in her chest, a quiet longing, a recognition of feelings she hadn't fully acknowledged before. The car seemed smaller now, intimate, the space between them filled with emotion rather than silence. She noticed the subtle gestures, the way his hand brushed lightly against the door handle, the way his eyes flicked to hers when he thought she wasn't looking, the soft sighs that punctuated his sentences. Everything felt deliberate, meaningful. A slow unfolding of a truth that had been waiting for years to be spoken. They passed familiar streets, corners of the city that held childhood memories, small shops they had both visited years ago, trees stripped bare by winter. Daniel's voice broke the quiet again, softer this time. I guess I've always wanted someone to see me. Really see me? And tonight? It feels like you do. Not like Lisa or anyone else. You. Emily's heart tightened. The emotion in his words was quiet but profound. She realized she had felt it too on awareness, a connection, a pull she hadn't expected but now could not ignore. She didn't respond immediately, letting the silence linger. Words were unnecessary. The feeling between them was already clear. Trust, honesty. Unspoken long and all mingling in the small space of the car as it glided through the winter night. Daniel exhaled softly, leaning back in his seat, his gaze still fixed on the passing lights. I'm not asking for anything, he said, almost as if he anticipated her reaction. I just wanted you to know. I didn't know how to tell anyone before. But being here with you, it feels safe to say it. Emily smiled faintly, her hands still steady on the wheel, though her chest felt lighter, warmer, aware. I'm glad you did, she replied simply. The snow continued to fall, the city quiet and calm. The ride, meant to be routine, had become something rare and profound. A private moment of emotional honesty, a gentle acknowledgement of feelings long held back, and the quiet promise that maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. The car came to a stop, but neither of them immediately reached for the door. They lingered in that calm, shared space, hearts quietly aligned, aware that something significant had passed between them. It was soft, subtle, romantic, and entirely real. The night outside was cold, but inside, in the small, quiet space of the car, something warm had begun, a connection neither had anticipated. A bond that would linger long after this ride ended. The car slowed as Emily drove through the final stretch of streets toward Daniel's apartment. The snow had thinned to a gentle drizzle, the kind that made the streetlights glow softly, turning every puddle into a small reflection of the world above. Emily's hands were steady on the wheel, but her mind felt alert, aware of the quiet electricity that lingered between them. The ride that had started as a simple favor had evolved into something far more meaningful. There was honesty in Daniel's presence, a fragile openness that made the air inside the car feel heavier with emotion, yet lighter at the same time. Daniel remained quiet for several blocks, his gaze flicking between the softly falling snow outside and the dashboard lights. He didn't fidget or check his phone. He simply sat in the passenger seat, calm, contemplative, as if the night itself had demanded reflection. Emily sensed he was thinking carefully, weighing what he should say next. She kept her focus on the road, but she also felt the subtle pull of anticipation, the kind that comes when someone is about to reveal something personal, something that matters. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. I feel like tonight has been different. Like I can finally be honest with someone without worrying about judgment. I didn't expect it to feel this way, but I'm glad it does. His eyes met hers briefly, and Emily caught the quiet warmth in his expression. It wasn't a dramatic confession, nor was it demanding. It was simply truth spoken carefully, thoughtfully. A gift in its own right. Emily nodded, understanding more in that moment than words could express. She didn't need to speak. Her steady presence was enough. But the weight of the moment pressed softly on her chest, a tender reminder that connections like this were rare. Daniel's voice broke the calm again, quieter this time. I'm not looking for anything from you. I'm not asking for promises or explanations. I just wanted to tell you how it feels to be around you. It's safe in a way I haven't felt in years. The word safe resonated deeply. Emily realized it wasn't just about physical safety, it was emotional. The kind of calm reassurance that comes from knowing someone sees you, accepts you, and values your presence. She glanced at him for a brief second, noting the quiet sincerity in his gaze. No theatrics, no pressure, just honesty. She understood without needing to speak aloud that what he was giving her was trust. And trust was rarer than any grand gesture or dramatic declaration. The car turned onto a familiar street, the one lined with small apartment buildings and old oak trees, their branches glistening with a coating of ice. Daniel's apartment was just a few blocks away. He shifted slightly, leaning back in his seat as if preparing himself for departure. Emily noticed the subtle tension in his posture, the careful balance between readiness to leave and a reluctance to break the fragile connection that had grown during the ride. "I want to thank you," Daniel said quietly, "for tonight, for listening, for everything. I didn't think I'd be able to open up like this, but you made it possible." His words were simple, but they carried weight, a depth that Emily felt in her chest. She realized the night had transformed something in both of them. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't rushed, but it was significant. Something had shifted quietly and irrevocably in the space between them. Emily offered a small smile, warm and calm. "I'm glad you did. I'm glad you trusted me." Her words were honest, measured, gentle, the perfect reflection of the mood that had developed. There was no need for exaggerated emotion, no need for loud declarations. The intimacy of the moment lay in its subtlety, in the quiet acknowledgement that this ride had become more than a favorite, had become a meaningful, emotional experience. They reached Daniel's apartment building, and Emily parked in the dimly lit lot. The snow had settled lightly on the ground, softening the edges of the concrete, making the world feel gentle and still. Daniel sat quietly, his hands resting on his knees, eyes flicking toward the car door, but hesitant to move. Emily realized he was savoring the final moments of their shared space, not rushing away, not yet ready to break the delicate connection. Daniel's voice came again, calm, reflective. "I'm not expecting anything from tonight. Not a change, not a promise. I just wanted to share this with you, because it matters." He paused, looking out at the faintly glimmering snow, then back at her. "It feels rare, to feel seen, to feel understood. I don't get that often." Emily's chest felt full. She understood completely. She had felt it too, the rare, quiet moment of recognition. The emotional honesty that didn't demand a response, the subtle closeness that grew from trust and shared vulnerability. She didn't speak immediately, letting the moment breathe, letting it remain calm, tender. Daniel finally opened the door, standing slowly, almost reluctant to step out. He turned slightly back toward her, his expression soft, almost wistful. "If life lines up differently someday, maybe we can continue this conversation," he said, gentle, calm, and unpressured. Emily watched him for a moment, her heart steady but full of warmth. She realized that this night, this quiet ride, had created something rarer: connection built on honesty, trust, and emotional openness. No rush, no drama, just the subtle awareness that something meaningful had begun. Daniel walked toward the building, his steps slow but confident. Emily stayed in the car for a heartbeat longer, watching the way he moved, the calm expression on his face. The quiet energy of someone who had finally released a piece of what he had carried alone for so long. She felt a subtle pull, a recognition of the unspoken potential between them. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't demanding. It was gentle, emotional, and entirely real. Finally, Emily exhaled softly, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. She started the car again, her thoughts reflecting on the evening, the conversation, and the subtle revelation that had occurred. The snow continued to fall lightly, the streets calm, the world quiet. She realized that sometimes the most meaningful moments weren't loud or dramatic, they were quiet, sincere, and filled with honesty. Tonight had been one of those moments, driving away. She thought about Daniel's words, the warmth in his voice, the honesty in his eyes. and the way he had trusted her without expectation. The night had started as a simple favor, a ride to his apartment, and ended as a gentle revelation. A moment of emotional truth, a connection that might grow into something more over time. Emily felt calm but awake, her heart full of possibility. She knew that the ride would remain with her a quiet memory of trust, honesty, and the beginning of a bond that had started gently but might grow into something lasting. The snowflakes swirled around the car as she drove on. The city silent, peaceful, and full of subtle promise. The night had been ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in essence. It had been quiet, calm, and full of emotion. And Emily understood that sometimes the most important connections start not with fireworks or declarations, but with honesty, trust, and a simple, shared moment in the quiet of the night. As she reached the familiar streets leading home, she felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the conversation, for Daniel's trust, for the warmth that had quietly grown between them. The evening had ended, yet it had also begun something newer, calm, heartfelt potential that was entirely theirs. Unspoken but deeply felt. Emily drove on, aware that the night would stay with her. The quiet snow falling around the car like a soft, delicate curtain over the city. And in that calm, gentle moment, she realized that sometimes the quietest nights held the loudest truths.